Would you like to learn from those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level? Best-selling author of Speakeasy and master connector Lou Diamond is here to connect you to some of the most inspiring and amazing people on this planet. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass.
Welcome everyone to another absolutely spectacular, fantabulous episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have a seasoned scale-up executive and strategic powerhouse. She really is. You're going to find this out immediately in the conversation. She's an advocate for women in tech and champions authenticity in leadership. She's been a CRO at numerous companies, and her podcast, The Operations Room, a podcast for COOs, is one that every person operating an organization needs to check out because their conversations there are just epic. Thrive Loud listeners, a woman who is still trying to figure out who she wants to be when she grows up, Bethany Ayers. Bethany, welcome to Thrive Loud.
Oh, thanks, Lou. Thanks for having me. Everybody else always talks about your great intros, and I have to say that I'm with them. Thanks.
Well, I told everyone that I'm trying to monetize this process, so we'll hit you afterwards if you want to use it for something when you're being announced to a stage, or if you need a voiceover for your own show. Who knows? But I digress. I'm fascinated by those who have kind of hit the gears and followed the passion of what they love and what they love to do. But let's bring our listeners up to speed so they understand what's going on. Can we do like a little rewind? I don't want to go all the way back. I kind of want to understand how what you're focused on now became your gig.
Well, I think I'm going to have to go a bit further back than you want, I'm afraid. So I am originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and that is pertinent, even though I'm sitting here in London right now for this story, because I grew up in a place where there was nobody really in business. Everybody was in the Defense Department or creating bombs. And I watched the movie Wall Street. And the woman in Wall Street was amazing to me with her MBA from Harvard and like just kicking ass everywhere. And I thought, that's who I want to be. That's amazing. I want to be in business. And for somebody who, like everybody in my family is a scientist, being in business, I didn't really know what it meant, but it meant Wall Street. And I then went to university, did political science, did an internship at a think tank, because even though I wanted to be in business, I decided that really what I needed to do was what everybody else in my family did and what I understood. Luckily, I hated the think tank and realized that that wasn't for me. I moved to London after graduating, and I joined just in time for the startup scene. And I thought like being in the startup original one in 2000 was absolutely amazing. And then I was in tech for the last 20 years. As you said, I've built my career. I built a couple of businesses and then realized that I was thoroughly unfulfilled. Yeah.
I'm loving
trying to figure out what I'm going to do now.
It's very weird when people do positive words like, like completely, thoroughly, like all the way up. And then the last word is the deflator, completely unfulfilled. It's like, the very positive, very big, and then it becomes negative. Okay. Why were you unfulfilled? What was it? What were you missing at work? What was not tapping into your heartstrings in what you were doing?
I don't really know. If I knew, then I would know what I want to be when I grow up. So it was more that finishing up another almost 5-year stint as a CRO, then COO at a fast growth company. And I just wasn't happy. I wasn't stimulated. And I've lost all of my parents. My dad died when I was 27, and then my mother and stepmother died about 5 years ago. And so I spend a lot of time, I think because of that, thinking about mortality and imagining what I'm going to care about on my deathbed.
Yeah.
And I just knew that building businesses was not going to be something that I was going to find inherently fulfilling or what I'd find pride in when I was reviewing my life, because I had done it already and didn't feel pride in it. So it was like it didn't take a huge leap of imagination to realize that in another 20, 50, 20, 30, 40 years, I'm still not going to feel very excited by it. So I started to imagine, I have half a life left, hopefully. What do I want to reflect on my deathbed? And what is that going to mean for me? And I left my company that I was at a year ago and just decided to prioritize, or as we say in the more woke world, center my life on joy.
Kudos to you. Let's start off with that. And obviously, a lot of the people who make the decision to find something that they love are not certain what it is, but know they need a change. I'm raising my hand because I was one of those people. I didn't know exactly what it was. But now looking at the skills that you've acquired, and I find it really interesting, by the way, that you knew you wanted to do something in business because it caught your fancy, yet you had this whole academia type of background, and somehow that led into technology and operations over the years. Before we get to what you're doing now, I want to do this part. I want to understand, you obviously are very good at knowing how to operate and run things, hence being the podcast you host, the work that you've done, getting startup businesses to the next stage and knowing how to operate those things. Where do you think that comes from? You think it's a little bit of that analytical and understanding process, or going into the research piece, but then getting people to be the most efficient, that's a specific like doers type of activity. Beth, where did that come from?
I think it came from my brain and the way I was born. I think most of the things that I don't know if it's most of the things that we enjoy, but most of the things that we're good at, we might add a little bit of extra zhuzh to it, but fundamentally it's what our superpower was when we were born. People saw me as a leader before I saw myself as a leader. And I also saw how to solve problems, how to organize people very easily. Mm-hmm. And so I wish I could say, oh, well, I read this book or I took this class and I had this insight and it was amazing, but it's just the way that I see the world.
Yeah. So you actually, this is kind of cool. And now I'm starting to see where this goes to. You're trying to figure out what's next. You're trying to make your life have this other meaning that hits the things that make a difference. And somehow we got ourselves directed into podcasting. Let's talk about, first of all, that usually is one of those things that pops up where you go, you know what? I think I want to try this. I could see where it is. Or was it something where you were on the other end of it and said, maybe I'd love to run a program? How did the operations room come to be?
And neither of those. So when I left my last company a year ago, I decided that I wanted to have fun. I wanted to do something that mattered with the second half of my life. I also, this is one point I should say, is that I used to really think that it mattered to create generational wealth and I needed to look after my children forever. And so I had this massive pressure on myself to create more money than I could possibly spend in one lifetime because I needed to look after my children. And at a certain point, I realized that was incredibly disempowering and infantilizing for them. And really much more important is to give them a good start in life and then give them the tools to create their own worlds. Mm. And that basically means that I don't need to earn nearly as much money as I thought I needed to, which gives me a lot of freedom. So when I left my last job, I sent out a LinkedIn post, and the LinkedIn post was like, basically what we've talked about. I'm not going to work the normal life anymore. I am only 5 years younger than my father was when he died, and that was a bit of a surprise when he died. I want to enjoy my life. And these are some of the ideas that I have. If anybody out there who is LinkedIn with me has any ideas, get in touch. And so my co-host Brandon got in touch and said, there doesn't seem to be a podcast for scale up and startup COOs in the tech space. We've all had to learn it ourselves without a lot of content. Why don't we start the podcast? And I thought, yeah, sounds like fun. And that's why we started it. Like literally, I'm centering fun or joy in every decision that I make.
For the record, I love that. Listeners need to know this. some of the most fun that podcasters have, specifically in interview programs like Beth and I both do, is in the stuff that you don't get to hear. And that is like what happens right before we start recording and capturing our guest's story. And when we stop hitting record, and then there's an entire conversation afterwards that's recapping all of it. One, I want to know if you feel that same magic and joy and fun in those moments, let alone obviously putting together great content along the way.
Absolutely. And also just meeting amazing people. Like, I love meeting people. I love making connections. That's part of why I wanted to come onto this podcast we definitely have a lot of values in common. I think that connecting with people and spending time with people is the entire point of life. It's where it brings me the greatest joy and the greatest fulfillment. I don't necessarily know what I want to do once I connect with people, but that's okay. Like, just hanging out is awesome. And then the other reason I really like podcasts is because I don't really like listening to business podcasts, and I find them a bit boring. But when you make your own, you're not nearly so bored. And you can ask all the questions you always wanted to ask.
It is true, by the way. People ask me all the time, what is Thrive Loud about? Because there are business people business people on the program. There's thought leaders, and then there's people who do the most fascinating, crazy stuff in the entire world. And as long as that conversation is kicking and is fun, it's great. Let's talk about the COOs, okay? Because sometimes operating businesses is not the most fun thing in the world. How is the operations room making the world for COOs and operating these businesses fun?
Yeah, I think there's probably sometimes fun, but less lonely would be the goal. Like, it's a really hard job being a COO because every COO is different. You're the missing piece to the CEO, and you're the spouse of the CEO, in effect. Like, basically, as a COO and being married, I had two husbands, and both relationships were equally difficult, and I had to put as much effort into both of them. But I've opted to stay with my husband and move on from my other relationship. And in the podcast, we talk a lot about relationships, about the CEO-COO relationship, about what it means to be a leader, what it means to be second in command, how do you stay aligned as, in effect, parents to the organization? When do you share things externally? When do you keep them private? What does it mean to be a leader in general? Like, everybody's definition of leadership, because nobody has the same one, which I find fascinating. Nobody also has the same definition of strategy or operating model, by the way. So it's not just isolated to leadership. And then we also sometimes get into really tactical conversations too. And interestingly, both types of episodes get similar listenerships. So we have one on like how to streamline your red lines in your end of year contracting process. And we have another one on emotional literacy and using embodiment to be an early warning system for your emotions. And both of them have the same number of listens.
Listeners, hold on to this thought for a second. Beth, remind me, I'm going to introduce you to somebody that probably will be phenomenal for the end of year episodes when people are doing budgeting for the next year. I've got somebody for you who has a whole different way of looking at how you actually think about what the next year should be versus what traditional businesses have done for years. Oh, congratulations, you had a record year. You're going to double that next year. Let's see how we can, put that budget into place. I digress. Yeah. Bringing it back here. I want to make this about you, Beth. How has this year been since you've left?
It's been amazing. It's been terrifying. There are moments of, why did I do this? Should I have done it? I also have a really big mouth and I overshare a lot. And so then I'm like trying to rewind whether or not I've overshared or insulted people that I didn't really mean to insult. I've been worried about money a lot. As you can tell, it's something I think about a lot. And yet it's all worked out. I don't quite understand how I accidentally had like a little bit too much money not invested. And so I decided that I'd bring that over from the US to the UK and sit it in a savings account. And when I spent all of that money, I would have to get serious about making money or get a job. And it's been a year and I have yet to touch it.
Wow, great.
And I'm like, okay, so something seems to be working out here.
I love it. I love asking content creators, authors, thought leaders, speakers, podcasters this question. Whether you know it or not, you are creating content that's valuable and you're giving a gift to the world. The world is benefiting from what you're putting together in your program. Yet there's always this like happy accident that happens to the person who creates the content, that they get a gift in return for the content that they create. Beth, what's been the gift to you in the operations room in the little time it's been out?
What is the gift? Like, one is just all that I've learned from everybody that's come on. It's a great way to learn, and learning is something that gives me a lot of joy. Also, I am addicted to my analytics, and I don't know if this is a gift or a curse, but I do love watching the listener numbers going up, and seeing all the countries that we touch. We are listened to across 77 different countries and have like one avid listener in Kazakhstan, and I would just love to contact them and understand like what the operations room is delivering for them in their startup there.
I'm just laughing because we do look at the numbers of where people are, and we also have charts on where we are, and it seems that someone must have been on vacation in the Mauritius Isles or wherever it was, and we were like in the number 3 podcast in Mauritius for like a week. I'm convinced just somebody went on vacation, was binge listening while they were there. I could be wrong, but the gift to you, what does it make you feel like? I guess I'm going with this. Is it at least starting to tap into the thing that you weren't feeling, that void that you were missing out in what you were doing before, that, absolute gap that was missing in here? Are we starting to tap into that?
I think so. So this is something that I was not planning on sharing, but fuck it, be open and share the world with everything. So super embarrassing and not something that I really like to own up, but basically I just want to be famous.
Who doesn't?
Well, loads of people don't, and you're not supposed to want to be famous, and you're supposed to also feel like there's lots of different ways that you're contributing to the world, and I do, but I fundamentally feel like I'm contributing to the world by being me, having interesting ideas, and not being afraid to share them. No. And so, being on the podcast and seeing that resonate with people is awesome.
Yeah, I think I want to comment. I think that it is. You talked about on the deathbed theory. I believe that what makes us human are the two things. At the end, we ask 2 questions: was I loved and was I appreciated? And I believe that the appreciation piece can be linked for others knowing what you've done and what that is. There's some fame in that, because obviously that's what you're become famous for, what you're known for. And there is that sense, if people are enjoying the content you're creating, or they know your brand, or you get to speak your mind and people know what that is, that's kind of that appreciation that I think it's tapping into. Now, whether it becomes famous and you become the next Kardashian, who knows? You could be the Kardashian of podcasting, for all we know. I mean,
maybe you don't
want to go down that direction. I want to be like a little famous. I just want to be
a little famous, yeah.
Famous enough is where it is. The question we love to ask here for those that are thriving: look, we all have those days when we're not quite kicking on all cylinders and we're a little off, and we're not thriving like we should be. On those days, Beth, is there a practice you seek or an individual you seek out to help you get back on the thriving track?
Yeah, I have so many different spectrums of thriving and not thriving that it really depends on if we're talking about like a bump in the road or a full-on crash. As I mentioned before, I've done a lot, I've just mentioned a little bit that I've done a lot of embodiment. So I did 5 years of therapy, and I'm now on about 7 years of embodiment. And that has given me a tremendous amount of resilience and an early warning system. So for a large amount of time, I can notice the bumps in the road and just go with them and have faith and know that it's a bump and it's not going to be there forever. I also suffer from some level of anxiety. And the worst is when you're just feeling really afraid and there's no trigger, there's no reason. And I actually had an episode about a month ago that started with anxiety and then moved into paranoia. And paranoia is not something I'd really ever experienced. It was just like even more fear. And I was like, the ideas of what was going to come and attack me and ruin my family, like it was pretty overpowering, but I knew that it wasn't real. And there wasn't a lot that I could do to calm myself. And so in those moments, the person that I work with my embodiment practice, I got in touch with her and she was able to just kind of help me see it for what it was and a little bit clearer. The second one is when I wake up in the night panicking, what I used to do is wake up in a panic and then try and remember why I was afraid or what I was worrying about or why I was experiencing anxiety. And what I now do is just wake up afraid and feel the sensations and don't look for the reason. And that is immensely powerful because if you don't find a reason, you don't feed it. And the fear, or at least I don't, like when I don't find a reason, I don't feed it. And the fear continues, like passes through my body. And then the final one is when there's nothing that really can soothe me, is just to accept it and knowingly numb.
I like it. I have never heard that before. I like the idea of whether, you don't feed the fear. I like that.
It really works.
I may use that. Let's do the admin part of the show because I've been dying to get to Fun Street when I learned about the info I'm going to share with the listeners very shortly. Share with the listeners all the places people could find you, websites, URLs, where they can learn about the Operations Room, podcast, everything. We will put it in the show notes. It gets more engagement, though, when they hear it from you.
Right. So the easiest place is to go to operations.co, and that is operationsroom.co. And that's where the operations room is accessible. And it also has areas for working with me and my co-host, Brandon. And then I am only active on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, it's Bethany Ayers. I was the original one because I'm that old. And so you can find me there.
No, you're not. Come on now, stop it. I don't want to hear this.
I have my Gmail is dot as well. Like I am.
We had a conversation about this just last night. That I'm one of the original Gmail emails, and when it came out, my children were just being born, so I gave them amazing Gmail addresses that one loves, the other one can't stand. It's a whole other story, but it was just, you didn't know what it was at the time. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
Are you ready to go down Fun Street with me, Beth?
Absolutely.
Okay. You need to share with the listeners what you shared with me as one of your all-time favorite movies.
Clue.
Now, here's why I'm laughing. This is a shout out to my to my sisters, and let me explain why. We watched this movie over and over and over again, and and by the way, for those that know this, just like the board game Clue has multiple endings. In fact, there are different endings, and when it came out in the theaters, I remember they actually showed in different theaters like one ending in one way or another, and then they said they showed all of them to everybody. It is the silliest, wackiest movie, but I want to know what connects with you the most about that movie, or what's most memorable.
I also watched it. I easily 100 times as a child. Like, I don't know. Every summer, my cousins and I would watch it on repeat for the entire summer. We had the whole thing memorized, and we would reenact it when we weren't watching it. So it's definitely just childhood memories and like, and the fun. Just going back to like what I care about. Yeah.
I think it's Bernadette Peters who's also in it, right? And she has that moment where she can't quite get the words out. It actually looked like she was improvising or whatever it was, because the cast reaction is great. Christopher Lloyd is spectacular, and everybody is just so good, and it's great.
Madeline Kahn was my favorite.
It was Madeline Kahn.
Was it Madeline Kahn when she was so angry? Yeah.
Yes. I'm so angry. She couldn't get the words out. I apologize, Bernadette Peters, not Bernadette Peters, Madeline Kahn, correct. Anyway, okay, we're going to do the little stroll down our pub crawl here, the Speakeasy Fun Street pub crawl. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to ask you things that relate just to you, and you're going to share all these answers, and there are no wrong answers because they're yours.
There are always wrong answers.
No, there's no. It sounds like the academic in you. Okay.
Yeah.
Starting out with this one, of late, is there a song, jam, or something that you're listening to more often than not?
So No. Well, yes, in that basically late 90s and early 2000s hip hop is kind of where I'm at, as long as I don't listen too closely to any of the lyrics.
That's fair. You like the beat, not necessarily what they're actually saying, whether they're shooting
Not
somebody up or they're cursing and doing something completely inappropriate. Okay.
or like raping women, horrifically misogynistic lyrics. So we don't listen to that. They're great.
We don't need to know those particular pieces, but along those lines, if we were to call, because now you're going to be famous, obviously, with the operations room and here on Thrive Loud, and you're presenting at some big conference or whatever it would be. What's the your walk on music that would play? Which one of those hip hop songs?
Oh, I don't know, because I think I'd then have to kind of like go for one of the women's songs, like maybe All About the Bass, which is a bit ironic because I'm really pretty skinny, but I just really like it. It's quite an empowering women's move. Yeah.
Favorite food that's not a dessert?
Avocados.
Okay, that's very good.
I know it's a bit boring.
Avocados
but
could be a dessert. I do love avocados. We have a lot of avocado. We have a lot of avocados on egg whites on toast. That's a big thing over here. Favorite dessert?
Cannoli.
I like
We can't get very much over here. Very good ones, but yeah, good cannoli.
Activity you wish you did more of?
Ooh, well, so if I knew what I wanted to do more of, then I know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So this is a really good one. Be on more podcasts.
As a guest.
Be more famous. Yeah,
Be
there
more
we go.
famous. I like it.
Yeah.
An activity you wish you did less of?
Worry, as you could hear from my entire set of worries.
I did hear that. An activity that's relatively new to you that you've recently tried that you like so much you want to tell everybody else to try?
So I started taking a pottery class as part of my leaving the working world. And after a year, it's only 2 hours a week, so it's not that bad, but I can now throw a pot, as in shape it. And it's super cool. And it's just a bit of magic. And when else do grown-ups get to play with mud?
That's fair enough. I always think of the movie Ghost whenever I see that thing, but that's a whole other story.
So does everybody. And I'm like, no, it's not like that at all. Like, think more back to being in the sandbox as a kid rather than...
I was never very creative with my hands. A lot of issues there. If I could snap my fingers and Bethany Ayers can be anywhere in the world, where is she?
Yeah, back in Albuquerque. Like, I wish I could just snap my fingers back and forth between London and Albuquerque all the time. It would be great, like not do the 16-hour journey home.
We have two things we need to dispel before this podcast ends. One, you said that there's no real good business in Albuquerque. Did you see, Breaking Bad? I just want to make sure. Go watch that show. There's tons of really good business going on in the $1 billion Albuquerque area.
legal business.
Oh, legal business. Fair enough. And I kid you not, I have a question. You've been living in the UK for a long time. You're from Albuquerque. You have more of a British accent. I still hear more of that than I do the American. Have you like absorbed it in living in London? Is that what's happened?
Every single English person listening to this is like, no, she doesn't. She's 100% American. She's never lost any bit of her accent. What are you talking about?
I hear a little bit of both, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Bethany Ayers, pleasure to have you on. Everybody go check it out, The Operations Room, and continued success to you on trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. I think you're figuring out a lot of things. You're already becoming more famous every day. So, hey, you're here. That must mean you're on the right path. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
To all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep moving onward and upward, and remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
So if that's what you're into, then go ahead and move along. Because I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, hey.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.